Hột gà nướng, hột vịt lộn, hột vịt sữa, trứng cút lộn, mắm xào đen.
Whether you're an expat here in Vietnam or you're living in your home country, you're probably always thinking about the future. And when it comes to long-term savings, where do you even begin? So that's where our partner Tenzing Pacific can really help you. One of the benefits of living in Vietnam is the cost of living is more affordable, so it often means that you have an increased amount of disposable income. And if you've got disposable income, how do you make the most of that extra cash to help you build a solid financial future? With Tenzing Pacific, you can start investing for as little as $250 a month. And they work with international providers, giving you access to world-class investment managers and global brands that you know. And one of the best things about investing is it's all about getting rich in the future. And by investing just $500 a month for 5 years, with a standard 8% annual return, you could end up with over $250,000 after 30 years, which is not bad for actually only investing $30,000. Now, I know 30 years sounds like a long time, but I've been in Vietnam for 8 and I feel like I got here yesterday. It's not that long. And that is the power of consistent investing. So are you ready to secure your future with the world's leading investment opportunities? Then talk to a Tenzing advisor today and find out how easy it is to start saving. Click the link in the description to get started and access special offers for a Vietnam podcast. And our partner, Seven Bridges Brewing Company, has just been crowned Champion Brewery of Vietnam at the 2024 Asia Beer Championship. And not only that, 4 of their beers have won 2 gold medals at international competitions. Well done to all those guys and their team. That is absolutely incredible. But as you may know about Seven Bridges, it's not just about the beer. They are committed to sustainability, which I absolutely love. And their brewing is with a focus on making a positive impact. So they reuse a lot of their ingredients in things like their pizza dough and their amazing spicy dragon sauce. So it means that you can enjoy a great beer and support a company that cares about the environment. So if you're hungry and you're a little bit thirsty, then they've got you covered with some of the best pizza that goes with their spicy dragon sauce and my favorite drink, the Hai Van Haze. So cheers to good beer, good food, and doing good. Get yourself down to Seven Bridges Brewing Company, wherever you can find them in Vietnam. And most importantly, when you do go, make sure you invite me if you're in Saigon, and I'll see you there for a beer.
Hột gà nướng, hột vịt lộn, hột vịt sữa, trứng cút lộn, mắm xào đen.
I came here to start my journey. A friend of mine said I'd never been to the Philippines. So I was like, okay, I'll meet you there. But if I'm going to go to the Philippines, I might as well go to Vietnam. So I came to Vietnam and man, this country blew me away. Everything about it, the craziness, the chaos, the organized chaos, the driving and everything about it. Like the people are so friendly, man. And so when I got here, Vietnam put its hooks in me and just said, no, you're home.
Welcome to another episode of a Vietnam podcast with me, your host, Niall Mackay. I moved to this country in 2016 after our vacation here and just fell in love with the place and basically have never left. I started this podcast in 2019 because I wanted to share stories of people connected to Vietnam, and it's been so exciting to share stories that live here and live overseas, all with something to share about Vietnam. Even more exciting is this week, we just found out that a Vietnam podcast was awarded the #1 interview podcast in all of Asia. So thank you so much to everybody who voted for that. Thank you to the judges who, well, actually it was more the judges, I think, the people who voted, but thank you to everyone who listened, who voted. It's incredible that this podcast, after 5 years, has been awarded for the best podcast in Asia, which is incredible. And then even more incredible, I personally was awarded the best audio producer in Asia for a small medium enterprise. So that is 7 Million Bytes Podcasts, which started as a result of this podcast. And I now make podcasts for clients all over the world. So thank you to everybody who has trusted me and my team to help share your story. And most of all, don't forget, if you want to join the Vietnam podcast community, go to patreon.com/a Vietnam podcast and join the community for free, or you can join for as little as $1 a month. And we're going to do cool things like the I said this wrong last time, the podcast pub crawl that we did at my guest bar. We went to 7 bars in one day, and you can be invited to cool things like that and other outings that we do in Saigon and online as well. So join the community on patreon.com/A Vietnam podcast. Now, in this episode today, I am really, really excited to share this guest story because I think it's a story that most people don't know about, or maybe they do now, but they didn't in the beginning. And I have a funny anecdote, as I do, about how I found out about this. My guest today is mostly well known for opening some of the best restaurants in Saigon. If you love fried chicken, that is the Big Boss Bistro, then the Brick and Barrel as well. He's from San Antonio, Texas. And if he's from Texas, then of course he must be a good guy. Well, I don't know if that actually is always the case, but hopefully at this time. And what we're going to be talking about today is his passion for photography in Vietnam and going to some of the coolest places, staying up all night long to get pictures of some of the most unknown, strangest, scariest, dangerous creatures they have here in Vietnam, and setting up his own charity to help with conservation work. So I'm really excited to introduce today somebody that most people know as James Jalokia, but I'm going to introduce him today by his real name, and that is James Hunt. Thank you for coming on A Vietnam podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me, man.
You are very, very welcome. Now, I got to share my anecdote, first of all, before we go any further. Now, I got to share my anecdote before we go any further. So, I obviously knew you from Brick and Barrel. We've crossed paths many times, always had a good laugh. And then you started posting these pictures, like nature photography and pictures of animals and really cool things. And I didn't know that side of you. And I noticed immediately there was a watermark that was really faint, and you had to zoom in onto the picture, and it said James Hunt. I remember saying to Adri, is he fucking stealing these pictures from someone? It says James Hunt. His name's James Jalokia, right? And she's like, yeah. I was like, that I can see the watermark. I think he's taking these pictures from someone else. And then it took not very long afterwards to realize, like, oh, I think that's his real name.
Yeah. You brought that up one time, and I thought about that. It never occurred to me until you said something about that one time, and I was like, dang, I look like a real jerk sometimes, don't I? Yeah.
So what brought you to Vietnam 8 years ago, about the same time as me? And you're probably all the same reasons, but what brought you to Vietnam, and why are you still here?
Well, so initially I came here for the photography. I came because I wanted to, I had a passion about it back home, but I really just kind of wanted to get out and quit my job and not quit my job, but take a hiatus and come out and start working on my photography. And I didn't even plan to come to Vietnam at first because, the whole, America, Vietnam War, we have the history in America. Like we don't see this side of Vietnam now outside of movies, right? So I came here to start my journey. A friend of mine said I'd never been to the Philippines. So I was like, okay, I'll meet you there. But if I'm going to go to the Philippines, I might as well go to Vietnam. So I came to Vietnam, and man, this country blew me away. Everything about it, the craziness, the chaos, the organized chaos, the driving and everything about it. Like the people are so friendly, man. And so when I got here, Vietnam put its hooks in me and just said, no, you're home,
It's the same story for everyone, and literally just recorded a podcast with Tao Nguyen, which should be available to listen to now. If you've not heard it, go back and listen. And we talk about this exactly. She's Vietnamese, and we talk about how nice the people are. And like I said, I came here 2015 for 2 weeks, and it just grabbed you. And it's the same thing from everyone.
Yeah, for sure. I went from the north to the south. Of course, the first thing you think of is horns and food. Right? Like the two things that hit you first are the horns and the food culture.
Oh, wait. You mean bike horns?
Bike horns.
I thought you meant like cow horns. And
No.
How
I'm from Texas. I see that all the time.
How does the buffalo horns grab your attention? The bike horns. Gotcha. Okay. Yep.
Yeah. No, the honking and then the food, right? The food culture. And so the first thing you eat when you get here is pho. And you're like, okay, cool. That's good. Moving on. And then everything else just pummels you. And you're like, oh my God, the food here. But then you start talking to the people, and just the camaraderie and the friendliness and the intimacy that people have with each other here. I'm getting goosebumps right now. Like people they'll put their hands on your shoulder. And at first it's kind of weird because we don't do that in the West, but then that's just them being like intimately friendly with you, and just, everything about it is beautiful, man.
And so how did you end up staying here, living here?
I realized how happy I was. I realized how happy this country made me. And I've always been a happy person more or less, but just fulfilled, I guess, And so I was meeting my mother. She was coming to visit me and we were going to go on a trip to China. And that didn't work out because my visa didn't come through because of Tet. And so we went through Vietnam, and I just did a second trip right through Vietnam. And I was like, this is where I am, this is home now. So I stuck around.
And then, so what led to opening up fried chicken places and being known for, I feel like you're known for your fried chicken.
Yeah. So that, I didn't plan on doing that. Getting through university, I was a cook at restaurants. I ended up becoming the executive chef at some place for a short time. And I got really tired of being in the kitchen. And I was like, if I ever do this again, it's going to be under the guise of ownership. I got here with no intention of that. I was just working on photography. And then this little thing happened, COVID. And then lockdowns happened and I got super bored. I couldn't go out doing my photography and stuff. So I started selling chicken wings out of my apartment.
No way.
Yeah. So that's how it all started. I started selling chicken wings, and then COVID started, sanctions and lockdowns started loosening up. So I expanded to an apartment downstairs of my apartment to turn into a kind of a restaurant. And then it just snowballed from there.
I thought Big Boss Bistro was way older than that.
Bok Bok. It started with Bok Bok.
Is that, I'm forgetting about Bok Bok. Where was that again? I remember going there a really long time ago.
That was in Bintan. It was in Nguyen Van Nao, which is not close. It's not D1. It's pretty out there.
I remember we were going that direction for some reason, and we knew Bok Bok was there. And so we stopped and we had a chicken burger or whatnot, and it was amazing. Yeah.
That was because between the chicken burger and then moving to where we are now, that was a very short period of time. So maybe weeks. Yeah. So we started with that. Yeah, it was just out there, it was out in Bintan. And then I was doing another, a YouTube thing where we were going to look for the best burger in Saigon. And we found a Kanban map. And Kanban map was just a kitchen in the location where we are now. It's just, they were just renting the kitchen area. It was delivery only. And so we were up there and I was looking at the space, and it was just an empty concrete room, but it had the rooftop. There was no building. So we didn't have this view obscuring us at the time. So it was just a beautiful spot. It was a wasted spot for me. So I ended up talking to the previous owner of Kanban map and saying, hey, what can we do to make this better? And can we join forces, right? Can I bring my kitchen up here and we can kind of do this thing, nest these restaurants together and bring people in? And at first she was like, no, I don't want to do this. And then after a few weeks, she messaged and she was like, how would you feel about buying Kanban map? And I was like, let's do this. So we worked out a deal. I didn't want to just cut her out. She's a really nice woman. We still talk once in a while. So I didn't want to just cut her out completely. And so I offered her a small partnership of Kanban map, but then we ended up moving Bok Bok in, and that kind of turned into Brick and Barrel. We brought Matty on, who is one of the best pizza makers in Vietnam. Tyler, I brought Tyler in to look at it because Tyler, one of the best cocktail makers, So we just made this thing just from selling wings out of an apartment.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Now we've got Brick and Barrel, and I have a great time there. I love the spot. Genuinely, I love our restaurant, and it's become a place where I feel like other people feel welcome. Other people come in, and it just kind of became a community more than anything.
Well, being a visitor and a fan from the beginning, it's a great spot. We did the podcast meetup for a while every month. That was cool. We've been there recently for the podcast pub crawl. And we'll generally come by. It's a cool spot. Yeah.
We love having you guys there. You bring your dog in, and it's a good time.
And then he just recently found out that Adri and Ulrika are two different people.
No, I didn't know they were sisters.
No, I'm kidding.
No, I knew them separately for so long.
On.
And I realized at Up Dog, another restaurant we had, I think that's where I realized that they were sisters, right?
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
So when you first came to Vietnam, was your name known as James Hunt? Or had you changed it on Facebook? Because I only knew you until the photography as James Jalokia.
Until the guy who was ripping off the photos. Yeah. So when I was back in San Antonio, I was looking for a job. I don't remember what happened with the job before. I don't remember what happened. But I was looking for a job, and I didn't want people, sometimes I can get a little political on my Facebook page. And so I didn't want potential employers looking at my Facebook page, because I do that, or I had done that, where I'm like, let me see who this person is. I didn't want people doing that to me. So I changed my name to James Jalokia because I was growing chilies in my backyard. Boot Jalokia is the ghost pepper.
I literally only found that out a few months ago. I messaged you, right?
Yeah,
I was I just thought Jalokia was your last name up until I didn't. But even then, I did not realize that it's the name for a ghost pepper, which is the most intense pepper, right?
Yeah, well, it's not now. It's not even top 10 now.
No way.
But yeah, at one time, it was the hottest chili, out of Bujalokia, out of northern, I think, India. But yeah, I thought the name fit, James Jalokia. I thought it worked well, and it wasn't anything in particular. I know a lot of people are like, oh, is he running from the law or something? Like, I'm very open about my last name.
People haven't said that, have they?
It's been a joke. People have joked about. Obviously, I talk to people from the consulate. Everybody knows who I am, so it's not a real thing, but it's been a joke. I mean, it's almost like a yearly thing here,
No, but this year's been worse, I think, like at odd times and things like that.
Yeah. So that's where the Jalokia came from. I'm not, it was never a hiding anything. And then I've thought about actually changing it to, I do James Hunt photography on my Instagram. I thought about changing it on Facebook, but honestly, it's become, I ordered chef coats for my restaurant for Brick and Barrel, and they accidentally printed James Jalokia on it instead of James Hunt. So now it's become like this entity that now I am that,
And so when you first came, you said you were doing photography. What exactly were you doing when you first came?
When I came here, I was doing mostly like landscape and architecture, but I always wanted to be into wildlife. I was a zookeeper in San Antonio back in the day. Yeah. So I've always been into animals, reptiles. When I was 8 years old, I used to catch snakes and sell them to a pet store. Don't do that, people. Like don't do this anymore. You don't catch wild animals and stuff. But that's how I started when I was a kid, and it just went from there. I've always had an interest in animals and wildlife. My mother, when I was maybe 8 or 9, which is what got me into it, bought me a National Audubon Society bird book. And I think that's where the seed was planted, So I got here, I was already doing landscape and architecture, and then I saw the amount of wildlife in Vietnam, and there it is. Just kind of like two worlds clash.
Yeah.
So,
well, what I love about it is, I think for all the reasons that people love Vietnam, the wildlife is not one of them. It's not one that you see. Maybe I just don't see it because it's not on my radar, but I don't feel like it's not one of the top reasons people come here, right? They come for the food, come for the weather, cheap lifestyle, the beautiful like sights of Ha Long Bay and things like this. And even though you're really passionate about seeing this wildlife, you really have to go to great lengths to see it, right?
Yes and no. You can go to Tao Dan Park. You know where the Unification Center is? A reunification center.
The Independence Palace?
Independence Palace. Yeah.
That one,
Isn't that
right?
the same thing? I don't know.
I think so.
Whoops. So there's a park right behind it. A big park. It's got a lot of trees. And there are snakes, lizards, birds. There's stuff in there. A lot of birds. This area of Vietnam is, for birding, one of the best places in the world to go. Yeah, absolutely.
I never see any
Not in Saigon so much.
Right.
But Saigon has them. Saigon has like bulbuls. Saigon has these red-breasted parakeets. You can go out there and see these parakeets out there that I'd been looking for 5 years, not realizing they're here in Saigon. Way. Yeah, absolutely. It's weird.
I can imagine there used to be, and then they basically just put concrete on top of everything because that's a problem. But where I live right now, out in Tan My Loy, which I'm pretty sure 5 years ago was a swamp, we still see lots of lizards, like blue lizards, and some really cool things as well. But I never see birds. Like, I remember the last time we saw a little bird, we're like, whoa. Last week we saw a squirrel. We got excited about a squirrel. We're like, whoa, wildlife.
Yeah, no, there are actually flying squirrels in Saigon. Yeah, I was jogging once and I saw two from one tree to the other. I didn't realize they were in the city. They're from this area. I didn't realize they were in the city. And I'm out jogging and I just see two flying by, So gliding from one tree to the next. These parakeets, if you look up in the very tall trees downtown, and you can hear them, like now I know how they sound, right? So I know when they're there. But if you hear a high-pitched bird whistling and you look up, you can see these parakeets like out in holes of these trees. They're there, and wildlife is here.
And so, well, my question is going to be, am I completely wrong because I don't see it? Do people come to Vietnam for the wildlife?
Most do not. Most people don't realize it's here. There's a huge misconception that there is, everything's been taken over, but everybody only sees the west coast of Vietnam. Nobody goes to the east coast of Vietnam. You don't go to the Central Highlands. You don't go to the west side of Vietnam on the borders of Laos and Cambodia. And that's where everything is. You see the cities and the highway up the coast. It's there. It's just, you have to go look for it. You have to find it,
Do you think that will become more of a tourism destination? Are there any companies that are starting to offer that as tours and bring people over?
So I am doing that.
Yay.
I am currently doing this. Yes. What I do is I bring people in and I set them up with local guides. Obviously, you want everything to stay. You want the local economy to boom, because when that booms, everybody's happy. You're happy. The locals are happy. So what I do is people will message me through. And I just took some people out last week, Mario and Nele. We went out to Cat Tien National Park, Phum Nhia National Park. And what they did is Mario found me on Instagram and saw my photos. He was like, hey, do you know anybody who can help me do this? And I was like, well, in fact, I do. So I set them up. We have a guide in Cat Tien who works with us. We've got some people in Phum Nhia and it's getting there. People are starting to realize that, yeah, there are things happening here. And then with the government coming in and actually making things better with the wildlife education, they're handing out actual jail time and fines for poaching. Like the government is getting super good about taking care of like conservation. And yeah, it's great. In the last 5 years, the government has been genuinely doing really great strides in conservation and preservation.
So what was the problem before those great strides were taken? Do you want to start your own podcast, or you want to take your existing podcast and turn it from average to amazing? Then listen to Smarter Podcasting with me, Niall Mackay, the podcast guy. I'll give you expert tips and insider strategies to make your show stand out. I also talk to podcasting pros like Ariel Nissenblatt, Sam Sethi, and Adam Shively. You'll learn the secrets of growing your audience, improving your content, and turning listeners into loyal fans. Just search Smarter Podcasting and start making the best podcast possible today.
I don't want to use the word ignorance, but just not understanding the importance of wildlife, of ecosystems. I think one of the things that helped the most is Sundong Cave. I think when people realize that that's a whole infrastructure of its own environmental environment.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, so when people realize there's a whole biodome
Ecosystem.
ecosystem, thank you, that's what I'm looking for. There's a whole ecosystem in this place. And when they're like, oh, that should be preserved, I think it just spread from there.
Because I know that one of the big problems in Saigon is people selling the tortoises on the side of the road. And I've seen foreigners post like, what do I do? People always recommend the ENV. I was going to say ENV, I got it right. The environmental, was it ENV
the
stand for?
Education for Nature in Vietnam.
That's right.
Yeah.
So people always say contact them. I'm completely ignorant. Is that a problem? Somebody selling a tortoise by the side of the road? Why should or shouldn't they do that? What should people do if they see somebody do that?
It is a massive problem. A lot of especially the bigger tortoises you see, they're called Asian pond tortoises, and they are a critically endangered tortoise that people are going and collecting, and they're for several reasons. Some of them will take them back to nature, and I'm sorry, Asian pond turtle, not a tortoise.
I called it a tortoise. Sorry. See, I don't even know the difference. That's all good. So it's a turtle, not a tortoise for one.
Well, right, so it's both. The specific one I'm talking about.
Oh, right. I was like, what do you mean? How can an animal be two different things?
Well, all tortoises are turtles, but not all turtles are tortoises. So when you see this, it could be this Asian pond turtle that's a critically endangered animal, or an elongated tortoise, which is also a critically endangered animal. And they're selling these on the side. Some people will make them into food. And of course, that's contributing to the decline of an entire species.
Where do they find them? Where do they get them from? Like, you see a guy by the side of the road selling a tortoise or turtle. I've forgotten already. But where are they finding them?
They'll just sometimes. So I was out last week with this couple, and we just had a tortoise walking across our path. Like they're just there.
But you were in Cat Tien.
I was in Cat Tien.
Yeah. So
they're out. They're going to be in places like the next Dom Nai, the district Dom Nai. They're in these places. They'll come to Saigon to sell them, or to sell them to somebody who will sell them on the street. Yeah. So.
There is a trade for them.
There is a trade for it. It's like pangolins, the most widely poached and traded animal in the world.
I did not know that. So I was going to bring up pangolins, or the other name. Have they got another name, more well-known name?
Tete.
Well, Tete is the Vietnamese name, which is also the name of the beer.
Right, yeah.
Which is more how I know it, which shows where my mind goes. But pangolins are the ones, if you don't know what we're talking about, they got like a hard shell, almost like an aardvark, kind of?
Like a kind of like an aardvark met an armadillo.
Armadillo, that's what I'm thinking of. They're kind of like that, right? And I've never seen one in the wild, but I know that they are critically endangered, and people like yourself are doing things to stop them. So to jump back, if somebody does see someone selling a turtle,
either
or a tortoise by the side of the road, what should they do? Should they contact the ENV, or what do they do?
Absolutely. ENV is super swamped, so they can't always get out there right away, but definitely contact them. There are other organizations that are coming around for this, but ENV right now is the best one. Education for Nature in Vietnam. Definitely contact them. If you see that, right away contact them. Don't take pictures. Don't stay around, because then the seller's going to know that something's up and they'll take off.
That's a good point.
Yeah. So just figure out where you are, find the streets, send it to ENB. They'll send some police over. They'll confiscate the turtle or tortoise.
It's good to know. It's also, it's good to hear, like you're saying, the government are taking strides like everything in Vietnam, once a decision is made, it happens quickly, is what I've noticed. And Vietnam is catching up to the rest of the world so quickly. And I hate it. I mean, you see it on expat groups a lot. I even hear people say it out loud when they denigrate Vietnam as a country or why they're not doing this yet. And obviously the war it was a long time ago, it was 50 years ago, but then they had mass poverty and malnutrition. And then in the 80s, everything's gotten better. Sanctions were lifted by Bill Clinton in 92, I think. And so things are getting better, and they're getting better quickly. And nature is one of those things as well. Because when people talk about it, in my opinion, 10, 15, 20 years ago, maybe longer than that, the government and Vietnam as a country didn't have the energy or the bandwidth to deal with things like nature because they had to deal with everything else. And now that those things are getting better, now that they can make strides to protect nature more. And I know even things like the laws can be different. We've talked to Michael Brzezowski before, or Brzezowski. I'm not sure exactly how I would spell it Brzezowski because it's got a W, but he's Australian, so he might say Brzezowski. I can't remember now. Sorry, Michael. But from the Blue Dragon, and he was explaining how, because the way the laws were written, that the sexual abuse of young boys wasn't illegal, because the way the law was written, it only applied to females. So that was something that they had to work with the government, who are very supportive, but just to change what was written in the law because it wasn't done. And so this kind of thinking leads me to the same thought about like the environment that Vietnam is and will get better. It might not be there right now, but that's really exciting to hear that it is happening.
Yeah, it absolutely is. With organizations like the ENV or Save Vietnam's Wildlife, Save Vietnam's Wildlife has been doing just amazing things, specifically with pangolins. They will confiscate pangolins, they will rehabilitate pangolins, and they're trying to make the environment for pangolins in their natural areas just conducive to what they want. And you can see it happening. Like even when one animal is coming back. So for example, you know about the wolves in Wyoming, right? They were reintroduced to Wyoming. So all of the animals are being eaten by these wolves. But because of this, deer populations are going back to where they're naturally supposed to be. Bison populations are going back to where they're supposed to be. So you're getting less erosion. You're getting less field collapse. Farmers are happier, regardless of whether you believe it or whether you can see, understand how that's working or not. Having the predator there is making the environment better. Having pangolins in Cat Tien is better, but you see the termite mounds coming back in full force. And one of the ways you can tell if a forest is healthy is by the termite mounds. So these pangolins are back. They're a termite eater, but because everything is coming back into balance, you see this healthy ecosystem coming back. It's amazing.
That's awesome.
Cool. Yeah.
A question I had was based on the fact that I've just been to Laos, and Laos, I learned, is one of the most bombed countries in the world. And there's a lot of unexploded ordnances still there. And when you were talking about the West is undiscovered or not as populated, when people want to see animals or they want to see wildlife, what is the situation like in the West? Because there's not many people there, there's not many cities. Are there a lot of unexploded bombs, ordnances? Is that something that people should worry about?
So I don't ever get a straight answer about this.
So the answer is yes then.
Yeah. So where I go, you can see the craters. Specifically, Gay Cat, which is just north of Phum Nhat. It's a place where they had this massive military structure that they were running jets out of. The highway, they turned the runway into a part of their highway. So the highway is actually part of this jet runway. And what they would do is they would break down these jets in Hanoi, send them to Phum Nhat, rebuild them, and fly them out to bomb carriers in Tonkin Bay and stuff like this. And so this area, because of that, they would bomb it heavily. I mean, you can see craters everywhere, down to 4 meters deep, these craters. It's massive. I'm told that you can't really go places without guides and people who are there because you may find yourself in a situation with some unexploded ordnance. I would say it's still an issue, but it's one that's skirted around,
Does make me worry about if I was to ever want to go there, and because it is a real problem. If there's craters, there's probably unexploded bombs. So be careful if you do that.
Yeah. And I would say, honestly, even if it's not there and it's just rumored, it's still a good thing for the environment because people aren't going there and they're not getting involved with the wildlife that's there. And so it's still preserving the areas, regardless of whether it is there or not.
So tell me more about Cat Tien National Park, because it's somewhere I went to not long after we first got here, so about 8 years ago. Made the really bad decision of driving there on our Yamaha Novo, which was one of the most painful experiences of my life because those are one of the worst bikes in the world and it's way further than we thought. And driving 8 hours on your bike is not fun, even though it might sound it before you do it. If you're on like a really nice big bike, then I'm sure it's fine, but not on a Yamaha Novo. But we had a great time. That was, as I said, a long time ago. And I know you go there a lot to do a lot of your photography. So I don't know if you know, has it changed much? Because I don't know if you went there 8 years ago, but if you do know, has it changed? What's the wildlife like there, and what's the situation like? And should visitors to Vietnam go to Cat Tien? If you want to dive deeper into our community of passionate listeners, then we have restarted our Patreon so that we can build a community of people, and we're calling that community the Bop Sao Dares. You can choose a level that suits you. You can become a Cafe Suada, a Banh Mi, a Com Tam, a Bun Tet Nung, or the ultimate level, you can become a Bop Sao Day. Join the fun with me and let's explore Vietnam together like never before. So hit that link in the show notes and join my podcasting adventure of a Vietnam podcast today. Cheers.
100% they should go. It has changed a lot. They have paved the whole road. So instead of like being partly paved in the very front, it's now the whole way down.
I remember we rented bikes and it was a nightmare, like bicycles, and we were like just bumping along this road and it was so painful. Eventually we just turned back. We were like, I think we did it for 20-30 minutes. I'm like, no more. Yeah, so that's all paved now. That's good to know.
Yeah, well, you're already sore from the Nova ride, right? And then you get there and you're bouncing on these bikes that are falling apart. Chains are breaking in the back. And the bikes are better. They've gotten better bikes and they've gotten a paved road. Most of it is paved. Like if you go toward the rapids, it's still a little, I think they just put asphalt down recently. But yeah, it's changed a lot. There are more options to stay. You can actually stay on the park now, which you could before, but they weren't advertising. They weren't actually like telling people you can stay here. So there's new lodges. You can actually stay on the park grounds. You still can't go out at night. You know, they don't want you getting attacked by lions and tigers and bears out there at night, which there are no lions and tigers and bears there, FYI.
But I thought you went out at night to like stake out the pictures.
So I go out with people who are allowed to go out. I have signed agreements. I have stuff that I'm allowed to do. I go out with Save Vietnam's Wildlife and help with stuff that they're doing. And in the process, I'll get my photos, you know. There are things that I do that most people aren't able to do.
Yeah, I mean, I see your pictures. And so what's some of the stuff that you photographed there that people don't expect? I've seen you post stuff like I waited 6 hours or something like that in the rough waiting to get a picture of a centipede or something like that.
Yeah, there are things like that. Yeah, I have waited. I do sometimes go out with a ghillie suit. In this weather, it's super hot. You know, again, luckily I grew up in the heat, you know, in the humidity. So I'm used to that, but I go out there and I will wait. But some of the cool stuff is like a lot of nighttime stuff, your vipers. But even during the day, you have your King Cobras. There are King Cobras out there. One time I was out there at the lake. There's a crocodile lake that's got now, I think the last count, 321 crocodiles. And I was out there with some people, one guy from South Africa, his girlfriend from Poland. And he was like, is that a snake in the water? And I look, there's a crocodile chasing this 3-meter King Cobra out there. Like how jungle, all I need is a tiger after that. Just to make it more jungle than it already was.
Just in that sentence there, you mentioned a viper, a king cobra, and a crocodile within like a second of each other. I'm just, this sounds awful. This sounds terrifying. No. And is a ghillie suit like camouflage? I actually don't know what that is.
It's that sniper suit that looks like a bush.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So literally you are hidden from them, but they can smell you and stuff. I'd still be terrified to do it.
Yeah, I mean, so the things that smell you are just going to try to get away from you. Like there's nothing out there. The biggest thing out there, there are elephants out there. There's one that actually roams through the park. It's a lone male. I don't even remember. He's only a few years old. He's an adolescent male who kind of wanders through the park. There are animals, like there's an animal called a gaur, Gaur. It's a super big steroid cow. And it's just this massive muscle bodybuilding looking cow. And you kind of want to avoid those because they don't like people. You know, they've been poached for so long. And, you know, like rhinoceros used to be out there. And the last one was killed, I think, in 2011. The last rhino was poached out there and they can't do anything about that now. So...
I know when we went to Cat Tien, they had the sun bears and the moon bears. Is that right? And again, don't know anything about wildlife. They looked like they were being protected. They had space. They're obviously being fed or captive, but not like in a cage. They had like a big space to move about. I don't think they move about so much, but are they treated well? Are they treated well is what I was trying to say.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's Free the Bears is another great organization, and they're running amazing stuff with the bears out there. There are moon bears and sun bears, like you said. And the facility that you saw before it's still there, but it's not used for bears anymore. They have some gibbons in there that are being rehabilitated. They moved the bears closer to Talai Village, which is I keep confusing that, west of
I do it every time. Every time in my head, I go, never eat shredded wheat. And I'm like 42. I feel like I should just know. I mean, north and south, we all know.
Right.
East and West is so easy. Like, you should know that by
Yeah.
now, but every time in my head I go, never eat shredded wheat.
Yeah. And there's something about Saigon too, that Saigon, like I can never get directions right here. Like which one is north, which one is south. But they moved that facility closer to Tai Lai, which is the village west of Cat Tien. And it's much bigger now. They have space to run around. They've got trees to climb up. And sun bears are almost purely arboreal. So they're in the trees all the time. So they're more comfortable there. You can hear them yelling and fighting with each other sometimes, which is par for the course.
Is there any direct route now to get to Cat Tien? Like, is the highway improved? When we went, there was a lot of trucks that we had to navigate, which was quite scary. Again, might just be ignorant to the fact, but I haven't seen any like tourist routes or buses or anything. Is there anything like that? That's why Cat Tien is not that far from Saigon, but it feels quite far. It's not, I don't think it's a big touristy thing, which I think it should be.
It's getting better. They've got a new park director, Mr. Tang, and Mr. Tang comes from an accounting background. So it's strange that he's doing such great things out there, right? But what this guy does is he lets the experts do what the experts do. You know, he'll listen to what they say and he will implement what they say instead of feeling like, oh, I'm the director, I know what I'm talking about. This guy is really good at like letting the people tell him how things are. And then he works on that. And of course, a lot of Cat Tien is for the marketing and the advertising and then bringing in the money. It's about the economy, and he's an accountant, so he's great at that. But he's really good at listening to the experts. As far as getting to Cat Tien, it's still the trek. There is one bus, or there are two buses. The only one I know of is called Xebe, Xebe, and it's a 4 or 5 hour ride, but it's 110,000, dong.
If you drove in a car, how long would it take? Or if there was a specific tourist bus?
If you take a car, it's going to be 2 million dong, so $80 US about, give or take. And it's going to take you 2.5, 3 hours to get there.
That's what I think is just like a tiny bit too far for people, because a lot of people, myself included, when we first came to Vietnam, you don't spend so much time in Saigon, and you're going to do the main stuff in the city, then you're going to jump down to the Mekong Delta, maybe you'll go to Phu Quoc. If someone's like, hey, do you want to go to a national park, but it's 3-4 hours away, I think that's the leap. And if there's a way that we can somehow make Cat Tien closer, which obviously we can't move the park, but you know what I mean? Like make the transport or the infrastructure closer, where it could get more visitors.
So how long does it take you to get to the Mekong? It's about the same amount of time.
Yeah, I know, yeah. Right? I know.
But when you're thinking about, you think about the food, you don't think about the animals. So you don't want to go to some just trees, right? So it's the same amount of time, but all you think of is the history and the culture and the food behind Mekong. So that's the big difference. It feels a lot further.
Marketing of Cat Tien needs to be better.
Too. Yeah, that too. And that's also getting better. But also, there's also, where's that line of making it too popular, So.
I just had this conversation with Tao about, she takes people on her tour to places without tourists. And I was like, well, what are you going to do when that becomes too touristy, right? And I guess that's a balance with Cat Tien National Park, because we were also talking about how one of my biggest pet peeves is when somebody's like, oh, there's too many tourists here. And you're like, you're one of them. So that, I guess, is the problem with Cat Tien National Park. Like, it's not untouched, but it's quiet. The animals can thrive. And then one of the worst things you want is then suddenly bus loads of tourists show up.
So a good thing with this park is when you go to the park, it's such a massive park. You don't realize how big this park is. I think it's the second biggest park in Vietnam, maybe the third, next to Cuc Phuong and Phum Nha. It's somewhere in there, top 3. So when you go there and you're a tourist and you're on this road, you're in the very 2% of it, So you don't see the other 95 to 98% in the back. You go from point A to point B to point C if you're going to Crocodile Lake. They've got some trails that run through it on the very front part of it. And that's it. There are species, it's so big, they're still discovering species out there. Phum Nha, so big, they're still, I may have found a new spider species last time I was there. So I need to go back and that's a whole different story, but I need to go back and collect this sample. They're still finding new species in these places, They're huge and they are made for preservation, and they're doing a good job with that.
Awesome. That's super exciting. One last question. There's obviously a huge problem in Asia in general, and I don't know if it's predominantly China, but using animals for like medicinal properties. So like off the top of my head, thinking like bear bile. I can't think of any others right now, but how big of a problem is that? And is that getting better?
That is only getting better because of these fines and prison time coming out. That's making a huge impact. Bear bile is a big thing, and that's where Save Vietnam's Wildlife and Free the Bears specifically comes in, and they're really doing a good job with collecting these bears and rehabilitating these bears. But then there's tigers. People pulled over with tiger paws. Most of those are farmed, but that doesn't make it any better. They do get wild tigers if possible.
Why tiger paws? That's like a lucky charm or something like that.
Like a rabbit foot. Yeah. And I'm sure
Kill a whole tiger for its paw. I mean, I'm sure they probably end up using the rest of it for other stuff as well, but that's... And what does that come down to? Education, like education, nature, Vietnam. Don't get a tiger paw.
Right. And they're also supposed to be more medicinal, like bear paws. If you eat the pads of the foot, that's supposed to be super medicinal. And none of this stuff is
hold up to science. It?
Like,
I love it when I'm just going off off course a bit, but when you get, I used to feel like this, so I'm criticizing myself, but the left wing people who are like, think crystals will heal them, and they're like, don't use modern medicine, and you're like, but it works. Like don't take a paracetamol, and you're like, but it works.
It's not hurting you, and it's making you better. So what's wrong with that, Yeah, but this pangolin scale is not making you any better, and that's a big thing is pangolin scales. That's why they're so highly sought after is their scales. They sell to China. China turns it into a powder, sells it to whoever thinks that it's going to make them cure cancer or whatever it is. But there are a lot of animals that are being poached, a lot of reptiles. You see the snakes in the wine. King Cobras are now illegal to poach. So now they're using rat snakes, and these rat snakes are putting wires in their necks to make them look like. So this is where the organization that I'm with a group of guys, and then Chris Oldnall really is the guy who's really putting this together. I've had too much time, so I put it on the back burner. He picked it up and he's running with it. But it's called Vipera. And so it is mostly reptiles. I'm going to mess this up. Vietnam Institution for the Protection of Endemic Reptiles and Amphibians.
Oh, sorry. Viper is an acronym. He's American, I'm going to guess, right? He's South African. Because I noticed recently, like, America... It loves acronyms because there was one, what was it recently? Well, obviously, so there's like the Patriot Act, right? Which stands for something. I can't remember off that. It's like the Protection of America, TRIOC, like it. And there was just last week, there was a new bill introduced in America, which had something to do with something. And the name was an acronym of what it was doing. And I was like, man, it's so creative. They come up with these bills like the Patriot Act or the name Viper. And then like, Viper is what it's called, but we're going to make it stand for something. That's so...
So that was me who came up with it. So that makes sense.
You're the American. There you go. Americans are so good at that. Take a word and then we're going to
acronymize.
That's what I was trying to say.
Acronymize.
Right? I don't think it's a real word, but it is now.
Well, I'm botting it,
There you go. You're botting it. There you go. Well, what? There's a TV show. It's a really funny one. Oh no, I think it was Guardians of the Galaxy. And he says a word and he goes, that a made up word? And he goes, I think it's Drax. He goes, well, all words are made up. I was like, that's genius. That's so true. All words are made up.
Yeah, 100%.
So anyway, tell me about the things you bought. No, go on. So tell me about Viper though, because that sounds awesome. That's
so Vipera.
Vipera.
So it started out as Viper. And so,
you couldn't think of an acronym for it. We're like, we're going to change it to Vipera.
So I did that. I was like, I want to make an acronym. Let's call it Viper because we're working with vipers here. And the thing is, it's all encompassing. So it's not just reptiles and amphibians. It is across the spectrum. This started because of some poached animals that came from Thailand. And we were like, oh my God, we need to save these animals. But there was nothing we could do. The organizations that we're tapped into were overloaded at the time. So like, what's happening with this? So let's start our own thing. So we get this going. It's been like a year now that we've been doing this. And so Viper started, Vietnam Institute for Protecting the Endemic Reptiles. And then my buddy Russell was like, well, what about the little frogs? Everybody loves the frogs. And I was like, okay, so Vietnam Institution for Protection of Endemic Reptiles and Amphibians. And so that's how Vipera came around. And then, like I said, Chris is running with it. And Hui, who's our local friend, who's just a reptile genius with snakes. He hates things with legs. He likes snakes. And James Holden, he's in South Africa right now learning about handling reptiles and stuff like this, snakes. And he's coming back. And so we're a group of people just putting this together. And we've already got the permissions and stuff. We've got the name. So...
Awesome. I'm excited to see that. That's so cool. Well done. Well, thank you very much, James, for coming on. Make sure to go and check him out at Brick and Barrel and Big Boss Bistro as well. If you want to get some fried chicken and some chicken wings, they're amazing. And some of the best pizza that you will get in Saigon. Also, you have the El Diablo pizza, which is, you've named Saigon's spiciest pizza. Do you get challenged on that sometimes?
I have once. It went well for me.
Yeah, okay. Because I know in Saigon, or I think worldwide, anytime you say something is the most or the biggest or the best, they're going to be like, no, it's not. I got a spicier pizza. But it is super spicy. I think I managed 2 bites of it. And
well, I was going to say, yeah, you've had it.
I've had it. It is spicy. I don't know if it's spiciest pizza, but it probably is.
Well, I mean, to be fair, it's a low bar in Vietnam right now.
That's true. It's up against like seafood pizza and that's pretty much it. So go check it out if you like spicy pizza. It's really, really good. And make sure you go check out Vipara. Thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you very much to Dolphy for hosting us today. They messaged me last week and they're like, hey, do you want to record a podcast here? And I was like, yeah, that sounds pretty cool. So thank you to Dolphy. Thank you for tuning in. Remember, if you want to become part of the community, go to patreon.com, a Vietnam podcast. We have a private chat there. We set up private events. You get episodes earlier than anyone else as well. You can join for free because we just want to build this community, or you can join for as little as $1 a month. Whatever you choose, we're going to build that community. And also, make sure wherever you are listening from right now, whatever you're doing, pick up your phone, look at your laptop, turn on notifications, subscribe, follow, do all of that good things. And then the best thing that you can do is copy that link or hit the share button right now and share this podcast with somebody else who loves nature or loves Vietnam, and you think that they're going to enjoy this as well, because that is the biggest way that you can help us. So thank you very much, James Hunt, for coming on. Thank you very much for tuning in. Cheers.
Hột gà nướng, hột vịt lộn, hột vịt sữa, trứng cút lộn, mắm xào đây.
Hello, I'm Steve Ahern, one of the judges of the Asia Podcast Awards. I'm interrupting this episode to let you know that you're listening to an award-winning podcast. This podcast won its category in the 2024 Podcast Awards, so you know you're listening to quality. Enjoy your listening experience, and congratulations to the team who created this award-winning podcast for you.